In this video, I'm going to be taking this triangular form and building it in clay. So I've rolled out my slab using my PVC pipe and my dowel rods and compressing it with my rib. And now I will hold the pin tool at a 90-degree angle and I will cut out my shapes. You can see on this piece, I am going to have negative space. I am not going to cut that out right away. It will cause that triangular to be weak, and I want to get the entire piece built before I cut my negative space into it, so it gives me more structural integrity. Make sure your piece fits in the clay and your corners or edges don't hang over. You can see this piece doesn't fit anywhere. So I can pull out another slab and I can continue to cut out my shapes. Hold the chipboard in place so that it does not slip. And this piece is a little messy. I'd probably recut it if this was going to be a project that I'd save, but this is just a demo piece, so I'm going to ignore it. But if you ever cut out a piece and your corners are not sharp and even, you should just cut a new piece. So because I am going to be creating corners, I have two shapes coming together to create a corner. I have to give myself beveled edges. Every time you have two shapes coming together to create a corner, you need to cut a beveled edge. So I'm going to hold my pin tool at a 45-degree and run it along the edge. I always kind of put my finger up against the corner. So I have a nice 45-degree angle beveled edge, and I'm going to do that to all sides. See the difference? Do this to all sides of all your pieces before you actually start to build. Keep your finger up against that corner so you don't tear the corner as you're bringing the pin tool across. So I kind of push the pin tool into my finger. And I'm also holding the clay slab in place so it doesn't slide across the table. Now, if you're building, let's say, a pyramid or a triangular form that has a triangular base as opposed to this rectangular base, you'll have to play around with the beveled edge. You might be closer to a 30-degree or a 60-degree. So it depends on the shape, and you just want to make sure your two sides are flush and that you create a really nice corner. So you're going to score and slip really close score marks, back and forth cross hatching. You do not want to have score marks that are light or that are spaced far away, because it will cause your slabs to split back open when the piece is firing inside the kiln. All pieces have been scored. I am now going to start to assemble. Even though this triangle is supposed to stand upright, I am going to work with gravity. It's easier to build this way, and I can stand it up later. So I'm going to score slip and smush that down, and then very quickly kind of get these lined up together so they're leaning against one another and they won't fall over. You will need to roll really tiny coils and fill in your seams. So anywhere you've joined two slabs, you will have a seam. You might have more than one seam. You need to roll a little coil, place it in that seam, and then use the rounded portion of your modeling knife to blend that up into the wall and down into the floor. and I usually dip my modeling knife in a little bit of water, you need to make that seam completely disappear so you can no longer see that it was ever a coil. This ensures that your two slabs will stay together. So when you're building with slab construction, you have this extra step, and you need to be filling in those seams as much as you can. And the smaller the coil you roll, the easier it is to blend it out. So don't stick big coils in your seams. Use your finger, smooth it, a little bit of water. Pinching my corners together. Because I've done those beveled edges, it gives me really sharp corners that are really easy to pinch together. Making sure my walls are nice and straight. And so when you're building with slab, you want to cut all of your pieces out, and you want to let them start to stiffen up before you start to build. If you start building immediately, your slabs are so soft and plastic that they will not stand straight, and they will either sag inward or they'll collapse back outwards. And so you will need to cut them out and let your pieces sit out until they start to stiffen up. And they should still be slightly flexible, but they shouldn't sag. You could still bend the shape if you want to apply pressure. It shouldn't crack. That would be too dry. But you want it to be stiff enough that, like, I can put this piece on and I know that that triangular shape is not going to sag into the piece. The smaller your shapes are, the faster they'll dry. And the larger they are, the longer it'll take for them to get into like a leather hard stage. So you might be waiting 45 minutes for small pieces. You might be waiting closer to a few hours for larger pieces, but you cannot rush slab construction. If you try to immediately build, you're going to end up with a really wobbly construction that has probably a lot of fingerprints in it and is sagging and collapsing, and you won't have sharp corners or sharp edges. So it's very important to cut your pieces, monitor the drying level, and then start to construct when they were at that perfect point where the clay is just stiff enough that it can hold its shape, but is still bendable, and you can still manipulate it with some pressure. You don't want your slabs so dry that they crack. I can use the flat edge of my metal rib and really drag it up the side and start to smooth this out. I have that one corner that's pretty messy. And I can only do so much smoothing while the clay is still this plastic. It is a lot easier to do crisping up and making edges really like crisp and neat once the clay is truly leather hard. I'm going to say right now I'm at a leather soft stage. So I'll do as much cleanup as I can, and I'll come back to it later while it's a little bit stiffer. And that is also going to be when I cut out my negative space, which you will see in the next video. I don't want to cut it right away. I want to let this guy become more stable. And because I am cutting negative space into this, I do not have to vent it like I vented my cube in the previous video. So you want to rotate it around, look for any seams that are open, blend those closed like that right there. Don't leave stuff like that. That can come back open in the kiln. So you've got to be real nitpicky, spend a lot of time getting everything locked tight. Wrap it up really tight, double bagged.